Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live chat. I'm Angela Walters, here to talk about machine quilting and of course answer your questions live. So if you're watching this live right now, then you can leave them in the chat and Jessica's here to write them down and I will answer them at the end. And I'm going to be talking about wavy line designs. We're going to be wrapping up the video series that we have been working through, and I have a giveaway for you. So lots of fun stuff. First of all, last week's live chat, I did a little giveaway. If you left a comment on the video, you could win a subscription box, and the winner is Karen Evanson. So Karen, if you could contact us, we will get that sent out to you. I also commented on your comment so that you can do that. I also have another giveaway, which I'll tell you about here in a second. First up, even though the challenge or our video series is kind of at the end, this is our last video, I'm still going to be doing live chats and checking in every week like I have been. The only thing is, I'm actually taking 3 weeks off. So this will be my last live chat until August 18th. So I'm actually going out of town and taking a little bit of a sabbatical. It'll be fun, but I'll be back on the 18th and we will continue our live chats and continue talking about our quilting. So looking forward to that. All right, let's pull over to the pictures and get to chatting. So first of all, this week's giveaway is going to be for a Westerly quilt kit. So you might recognize a quarter of that quilt, right? That's that custom challenge panel that I put together for the video series that we work through. And I was thinking that I really like the panel, but I have a really tall husband and a bigger bed, so I wanted to make it a little bit bigger. And I decided to sew 4 of them together, put a little bit of stitch and flip in between them. So if you want to get the quilt kit, you can check the link in the description box below. It's $99.95, and you get 4 of the panels, binding fabric, and accent for the stitch and flip, plus the pattern. Anyway, but one lucky winner is going to win the kit. So if you're watching this either live or sometime before next Thursday, just leave a comment on the video, not in the chat. After I'm done going live, then leave a quick comment letting me know what you've thought about this video series, and I will draw a lucky winner on Thursday and we'll get that sent out to you. So again, for more information about that or any of the video or any of the designs I'm going to show you in this live chat, just click the link in the description box below and we'll have all that information. So good luck. Hope you win that nice big quilt. This quilt ends up at 84 by 104. It is a big quilt, so I'm looking forward to quilting it and putting it on my bed. All right, this week in the video series that we've been working through, the Fillers Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, we saw wavy line designs. And wavy line designs are great. I like to joke that anybody can quilt a wavy line. Just try quilting a straight line and chances are it'll turn out wavy. And we really kind of went through a range of designs. And like the rest of the videos in this 5-video series, it was packed with designs. Please don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to quilt them all. Pick one, pick a few, have fun with it. But if you are quilting along with me on the custom panel, you can kind of see how I finished up that last area in that white background. Now, the area wasn't super defined. I mean, the design in the panel kind of shows you where it can go, but I want to show you a couple different options if you haven't started quilting your white areas. When I quilted it, I just kind of imagined that those lines go at the diagonal, and I quilted a different design in each one of those sections. And I went ahead and just quilted that straight line and defined that area. However, what that's going to give us is 2 edges that are irregular on both sides. No big deal, not any more difficult, but if you're like, oh, that's a little bit too much to think about, you can go out to the side, out horizontally like this. So whatever you do, if you're quilting along with me, just try the designs. Try them all, try a few, come up with your own variations. Don't stress out too much, just get it done and see how you like it. But that will kind of show you how I broke it up. Now, it seems like every week the quilting diagrams got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I have a really hard time pulling myself back. Anybody that works with me can tell you I usually overdo everything. If it's not worth overdoing, it's just not worth doing. But be sure to check out the free quilting diagrams if you need help with any of the designs in this video or any of the previous videos. I think the free quilting diagrams from this week had 6 or 7 pages, and the expanded resource, which is I think $4.99, you get 29 pages. Like, it was just so big. But I love talking about it. I want to give all the tips and all the hints. So be sure to check out the free ones for any of the videos. And then for this challenge, if you need a little bit more help with any specific week, you can check out the expanded PDF with that. All right, so wavy lines. Up to this point, we have seen 4 other videos or some other videos of different fillers, different kind of shapes. And usually they all kind of fit different areas. Some of them are bigger areas, some for smaller. But wavy lines are all pretty much going to need a medium to larger size area. You can fit it in small, tiny areas. It's just not easy at the beginning, so you want to have some time to get that momentum and that wave. So usually, give yourself 5-6 inches and up to fill it in. And the first one we saw was the Loopy wave. And this is a perfect example of why I might pick a design, not necessarily for how it looks, but for what it helps me do. Of course, we could quilt just wavy lines, but one of the trickiest things to quilting them on a sewing machine in a long arm is transitioning from the start to stop, right? So if you're quilting on your sewing machine, as you need to reposition your hands, you have that start and that stop. And sometimes as we're getting comfortable, easing in and out of that, we have that little bobble or that little area where the little stitches get tiny. So by adding a loop in at those moments, that's just going to help hide that little transition between starting and stopping. So that's why I put the loops in there. Now you might think, oh, I thought she did it for the texture. No, I just did it because it makes the quilting a little bit easier. But it also does add an interesting look, and it's just a fun way to kind of get started into your machine quilting. It's a nice, I'm not gonna say easy, because anybody that's learning machine quilting might say no, design is easy, but it's just one of those that the way it goes together is fairly basic. We all can imagine what a wavy line looks like and what a loop. And so if you're kind of newer, this might be a good one to start with. But then once you get comfortable with it, you can really change up the shape. It doesn't have to be a single loop. You could do a double loop. You could do a pointy loop. You can start kind of building off that to create some different textures and designs. Kind of learn the base and kind of build off of it. But another reason I include that is because all of the other designs that we're learning in this video are based off those wavy lines. And so we kind of have to get that down before we move on. And as I arranged the designs, I was kind of thinking, how do we progress, right? Like, we're learning how to quilt the wavy line. What's the next thing? Let's try to make it just a little bit more regular. Let's not worry about echoing right now. Let's just kind of use those wavy lines to break up the bigger areas. And that's where we saw the ribbon candy with the wavy lines. Ribbon candy is, the reason I love this technique or this idea is because when we think of designs that work in sashings or borders, you might think ribbon candy, but you might not think of it as a filler. But it is a great filler for like 2 to 4 inch spaces, because it can change as we fill in those areas. And using the wavy lines to break up the space and then give us a section to fill in, it just kind of lets us take those bigger areas and break it up into chunks. So this is going to be something I'm probably not going to do in a really tiny area, but a bigger area behind blocks or even over a whole quilt. It's going to be a lot of fun. But what we're doing here is we're not necessarily worrying about making them a perfect echo or a mirror. We're just kind of working on spacing them out a little bit. So when you're working through this, you can put any filler in there, of course. If you're wanting to do wishbone's a great option. I'm sure you can come up with some other ones, but it's just a really fun way to kind of just, I don't know, break up that area and make it more fun to quilt. And depending on how you quilt your wavy lines, you're going to get different effects, right? If you're newer to ribbon candy, maybe you don't make your waves so extreme or your area so irregular. It can be more subtle, and that's going to be a little bit easier to fill in. But as you get more comfortable with it, you can really kind of change up that size, and you can see that different texture that comes out with the quilting that's inside of it. Now, one thing in the video that I didn't leave in because the video was like 27 minutes long, and that was like really trying to keep it succinct. You might wonder, why am I quilting that wavy line instead of just marking it out? So I could just mark my wavy lines and use that as the boundary to fill in. But what tends to happen is if we don't have that wavy line, the unquilted area between the rows of the ribbon candy will kind of make a different effect, and it doesn't look quite as good to me. So if you're wondering, you might not have been wondering, but if you were, that's why. But it also just allows you to kind of establish your section and fill it in. But throughout all the designs, and I don't think I put it in every one, but you can change the way you approach a design depending on your preference. I mean, that's the most important thing right there. So when I throw out different options, just know, do whatever is easier for you and how you feel comfortable quilting the design. That's the most important thing. And in here we can see the design with the thread color that blends in. In the video, of course, I'm using a contrasting thread because you really need to be able to see what we're doing. And the best way to contrast on white fabric is with darker thread, which is always a little scary because it doesn't look as great. But when you have that blending thread color, you have that pretty texture, that's what you're going to get. That's the look you're going to have. So the individual ribbon candy is not going to show up so much. So if you're like, I don't know, I'm scared about it, you can try it with the matching thread. And I promise when you're done, you're just going to see that cool texture over the whole thing. Then we move on to echoing. We're going to add some echoing. We're going to continue with our lines spread out, but we're just going to add a few more steps, right? We're just building up to it. With the Ogee design, I'm not the best at naming things. This is actually something I named it a long time ago. Ogee, I think, refers to the double S shape. But basically, I mean, if you think about it, we're just quilting groups of wavy lines and filling in between it. What's happening here is when we quilt our initial wavy line and we echo it, it builds it up a little bit more so that it doesn't just disappear like it does in that ribbon candy. So we're using echoing to really kind of separate what we put in between it. Another thing I didn't mention in the tutorial, You can echo it as many or as few times as you'd like. If you're quilting this on a sewing machine over the whole quilt, maybe you just want to quilt one echo line because you don't want to have to reposition the whole quilt for one line. Or maybe you love quilting echo lines and you want to add more. It really doesn't matter. When you're done, if you use the same spacing, you're not going to be able to tell if one group has 4 and one group has 5. Just do whatever you feel comfortable doing. But once we make our section and then we're filling it in, and here I'm just doing some arcs. I'm easily amused. I love how the arcs are going a different direction. They're kind of a little bit more vertical, but the spacing is the same. Very important because I want it all to kind of blend together. But of course you can fill it in with whatever you want. But this was kind of the beginning where we saw the mirror imaging, right? The mirror line, where we're kind of paying attention to the line we previously quilted and trying to quilt the other one so that it's reflecting, right? It sounds a lot more complex than it is. If I have this line that's curved, if this line is moving closer to me, then this one's going to move closer. If that line goes away, this line goes away. I just wanted to kind of create that space that was kind of bigger and smaller. Now this design is not as important, but it just kind of lets us start flexing our wavy quilting muscles a little bit and getting our different effects with it. This of course is going to be for bigger areas, in between blocks, especially if you have like a big column of blocks. I'm going to do this in maybe solid fabrics or tonal fabrics. If you can't really see the quilting, I'm probably going to do something a little bit easier for me, like a swirl, something like that. But of course you can use different fillers, and so you're just going to get a slightly different effect. Here we can see the matching thread, or the not really matching, but thread that blends in a little bit more with the different fillers. So you can kind of play around with that and see what you like to quilt, and it kind of keeps the quilting a little bit more engaging and a little bit more fun. And then this is the example where you can see the contrasting thread. So using some serpentine lines and some wishbone, and then quilting maybe my arcs so that they face away from each other, makes it a lot of fun. Now, I think I said this in the video, when I'm quilting it, I make my section and I fill it in. I quilt my next line and I fill it in. This is due to the fact that I really started machine quilting on a long arm, so I'm working top down. However, on a sewing machine, or you could on a long arm, I could go through and do all my wavy lines and then come back and fill in between it. This might be ideal if you're not comfortable with free motion quilting and you want to use your walking foot to create those wavy lines, and then you want to come back afterwards and then put on your free motion foot and use the filler. So again, play around with these designs, find the arrangement that feels comfortable for you. Well, now we are kind of letting that echoing go, but we're really trying to be specific about that mirror image, or that line that gets closer and further apart, because we're combining it with the Starburst design. So this is just a great way to, I mean, if you can't make up your mind, do I want curvy or geometric? Well, this is do both. Or if you just want a fun, different shape. When I'm thinking of through the designs that I want to include in the video series, I'm trying to think, what is versatile, what are we going to use, and what's going to be fun as well, right? I could show you all the same designs that we've seen, but this is just a kind of great way to combine the two and let you play around with it. Somebody in the type chat before we went live said, oh, I struggle with the straight line, so I used a ruler. Fine, that's absolutely great. So if you wanted to, you can. But I'm quilting those straight lines in a fairly short section, so I'm just winging it, but you can do whatever you will do. So is this going to be a design you're going to use on every quilt? Probably not. A little bit more mod, a little bit more whimsical, just a little different, but it's still going to be one of those designs that you'll think, oh, I should quilt that. And here you can see a little bit of the contrasting thread. In the expanded resource PDF, I think it's all a blur. This whole challenge is a blur. I really bit off a big chunk with this. You don't have to quilt the wavy lines and then fill in with the Starburst. You could quilt your Starburst and then fill in with the wavy lines. Totally fine. So you can, it's like which came first, the chicken or the egg. You can pick which one you want to do. Then we moved on to the wood grain. Wood grain, as far as like of all the designs we learned, this one and the wavy, which we'll see here in a bit, are like probably the most versatile. This design, great. I mean, it is so fast and fun to quilt once you get the hang of it, and it looks great on almost any kind of quilt. I mean, if you think about anything that's overly complex, like a quilt like Elizabeth Hartman patterns with the little animals, wood grain's perfect. It has a nice texture over the whole thing. But you can also use it as a filler because we're just going from defined edge, so if I want it to go in between blocks or even other quilting designs. But I'm going to give myself a little bit of space with this, of course, to let it develop. But here we can see two feathers and then quilting that wood grain in between it. So really, how you quilt it, how dense it is, how many knots you add, how many wavy lines you add is going to really kind of change the look of the design. And we're still quilting our wavy line, and we're still echoing. We're just throwing in a pod or a knot kind of shape and echoing it out. And so if you're working through this design and you're struggling with it, The most important thing is just make sure you fill in any gaps. That's it. And when you're done, it's going to be fine. I promise. You just have to kind of get to that point where you've quilted a whole section to know that it's going to be okay. But then we saw, which is one of my favorites, of course, they're all my favorites if I'm being honest, the variation where instead of quilting our knot and echoing in and out, we create a pod and we fill it in with a different filler. Same basic shape, goes together the same way. It's just instead of echoing, we're closing it off and filling it in with a different design. This is great if you're struggling with that knot shape and you don't want to mess with it. Or great if you want to practice a couple of fillers and kind of alternate between them. This is just going to add a pop of contrast and interest to your background, and you can just kind of be intentional about what designs you use and where you place them, but the effect is really cool, and I'm literally just quilting little sections and filling them in. It's like echoing is doing all the heavy lifting for me. One thing I didn't really get to stress too much in the video, just due to time constraints, is it does pair really nicely with the wood grain. So I can quilt some knots and I can quilt some pods. I can alternate between them and be more intentional. So here, in this example, I've kind of alternated between the two to kind of create that secondary pattern, just because I thought it looked kind of fun. So you can be really intentional about where you place those to create some different effects. And here you can see you don't even have to add a lot of pods. You can just add a few, and you can be, again, more intentional about the placement to create those secondary designs. Great way to handle bigger areas where you want some interest, a secondary pattern, but nothing too ornate or too over the top that's going to distract from whatever you're putting around it. Now, how about this one? This one was a new one. We hadn't seen this one in this challenge, the angled wood grain. So mod, so funky, so fun. I really enjoyed this one. I've had a sample that I've quilted of this for years, and I've never been able to fit it into a challenge, but now I was able to get it into this one. It's called the angled wood grain because we're doing the same kind of shape, except instead of wavy, it's just kind of straightened out. So if you're struggling with wavy lines, well, there you go. There's a geometric option. What's really cool about it is I'm just kind of creating my pod and I'm filling it in, but just like we saw with the regular wood grain, I can put different fillers in there. I can echo inside that pod shape. And the most important thing, you know by this point what I'm going to say, you just want to make sure the whole thing is filled in. So if you get off track, just add some lines in and try to keep that spacing as consistent as possible. But definitely fun and little funky. And here you can see the example with the contrasting threads. So just totally different look, but just by changing up just a little bit of the shape. So a lot of fun, lot of fun. All right, Wavy. This one is great. We saw this before in a couple of challenges. Great for irregular areas. If you're filling in areas that are all different sizes, you're not comfortable with the knots of the wood grain, it's going to be pretty much the same thing, where I'm just kind of including these touches where these lines are kind of running into the previous line and just filling it in. And this also is great around blocks. I mean, really versatile. It can look like hair, it can look like fur, it can look like wind, depending on what you put it around. It can look like water. So it's really great for any kind of quilt. I can't imagine a quilt that this wouldn't look good on. So even traditional quilts. So really fun to learn. Again, try, and I think in the video I show, like, the biggest struggle that happens with this is sometimes quilters straighten out too much. Like, I joke the wavy line's easy to quilt, but sometimes in practice it's not. And so we really want to focus on keeping that line nice and wavy, because that's where we get that movement and that texture. And then lastly, we finished up with the merged lines design with fillers. So we saw this in week 3 with the merged lines design, and I had kind of hinted in a live chat. I was like, we'll see this one again, where instead of adding more echo lines and more traveling, we're putting filler in between those sections and creating that neat texture. And what I love about this design is just echoing is what creates that look like they're kind of weaving in and over each other. And like you've heard so far, I mean, you can switch up the fillers, you can quilt some echo lines, you can just kind of really play around with that and find what you'd like. This, though, is going to work more in a medium space, not so much a super large or super small space, because I don't like quilting those long straight lines over a big area. But if you tried the merged lines design and you're like, oh, this is great, but I don't like all the echoing and traveling, this could actually be an easier option because you can omit that. Now you might be thinking, well, geez, Angela, you should have led with that instead of the regular merged lines design, but that's just how it worked out. It's totally fine. So again, you can kind of see the cool effect with this. And also, as you're adding your echo lines and you're creating your space, you can echo either side. You can even just quilt straight lines. Just fill it in, try to keep the spacing similar, and then move on, and it's going to look great. So again, really fun. And if you look at this, in this section, remember I did it kind of diagonally, and that was really long, so instead of quilting it that way, I flipped it so that I had the shorter line to work with. So again, I'm making the design work for me and my preferences and for what I feel like quilting. So definitely a lot of fun. So we saw 9 different wavy line designs in this challenge, and to fill in that area. Again, as we look back over the 5 weeks of the stuff that we've learned, from pebbles to swirls to geometric to some favorite ones to this, we have learned a lot of designs. I could probably break out each week into its own free motion challenge. When I got done, I was like, oh, I probably should have just done that, because it was a lot of content. But I don't want you to get overwhelmed or feel like, oh, I've got to quilt all of that. It was so much content, I couldn't even keep up with it. And so there are a few videos for designs that I owe you, but for the most part, if you look back on your free quilting diagrams, there's a QR code that you can just take a picture with your phone, and it will take you to that week's, and you can see all the video or designs that didn't make it into the original video. So I just released a feather filler video yesterday, I think. It's the blur. And so that's on that page as well. So there was a request in the type chat to compile all the videos, and I'll probably send up like a wrap-up email like, hey, this challenge has been fun, and here's where we're at. So you can kind of go through that in order. But again, they're all on the video, like on the page, fmqchallenge.com. You can check that out. And so it's been fun. I love starting a new challenge, and I love finishing a new challenge. I went over to Jessica's house last night and had some beverages, and it was just great because I was like, I don't have to film tomorrow. But it's been so much fun, and I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, now it's over. Not really. The challenges stay on my YouTube channel indefinitely, and so you can take the time to go back and look through previous ones, and I'll still be chatting live every Thursday, and then probably, don't get your fingers crossed, but usually in the fall, I'll announce the next one. So I kind of spread them out a little bit. So I hope, though, if you quilted along with me, like if you feel like, this is where I started and this is where I'm at right now, I hope that you've seen improvement and feel more comfortable with the designs. Now, Jessica, we have any questions? I see we have some questions wrote down. One of the great things about doing this live is it keeps it just from being a video tutorial, right? I can touch base, make sure you're being successful with what we've learned. How do I pick filler designs when going in between a number of items? So when I'm picking designs, right, now you have a quilt, a whole panel full of a lot of different designs, like 45 different designs. Usually here's the rules I follow, and this is just the game I play, so you can play your own game. If I've just quilted one type of design, I try to pick something opposite. So if I've just quilted some geometric dot to dot in the block, I'll try to pick something curly, swervy, curvy, something softer. I also now, like when I talk to the designs, and I try to show on the handouts, like the expanded PDFs, like where would you use these, right? So like, I don't know, is it a busy fabric? Am I not going to see the quilting anyway? Well, then let's do a swirl. So I kind of know the designs that I like to put in those areas. And then also going off the size of the area too. Like I don't want to try to fit a complex design in a big design in a small area, and I don't want to try to quilt pebbles in a big area. So knowing your designs and knowing where they work really well is going to be very helpful in picking your designs. Now, how do you gain that knowledge? Well, from practice. So just pick some, and you'll learn when you're done what do you like and what do you not like. And so it's a great way to do that. But sometimes I just feel like quilting a swirl, so I'm going to quilt a swirl, right? Sometimes that's about as deep as it gets. So try not to overstress about it. Just like, oh, that looks like fun. And knowing if you don't love it, you can switch it up. How do I suggest quilting the optional borders for the panel? Well, if only you'd learned some fillers during this video series. No, I'm kidding. The border is not solid. It's tonal fabric. It's textured. So I think you should just pick a couple different fillers and maybe try them in there. There has been a request for some suggestions. I obviously won't be doing a live chat. Probably won't get to that till next month, but I'll try to put something together. If you are, not doing it live, you can do that then. On my long arm, I have trouble with angled lines in the wood grain and the merge lines. Without the rulers, they are wonky. Any tips? Oh, the joys of a long arm. When you think about going up at an angle, you are working with two sets of wheels, right? One's going this way and one's that way, and you have to engage them both. So ultimately practice will help, and I think using a ruler is fine if that's what makes you feel comfortable. I try to keep my lines fairly short, so I'm not putting it in a big area. And when I'm quilting, this is gonna sound weird, but I just try to move my arms. I don't need my whole body momentum. I just move my arms. So I don't know if that really helps, but you can definitely use a ruler if you'd like, or that shape is very, very reminiscent or inspired by the Chevy ruler. If you've seen my Chevy ruler, you'll see that kind of shape. That is where that shape comes from, because it's kind of tricky to go from straight to curved to back to straight, and that's just going to come with learning control of your machine. But starting with your ruler, no problem. It's going to be fun. Do I quilt with fillers on applique quilt blocks? Absolutely. If you think about it, we already have our main element, the applique part. That's the most important thing. And so filling in around it is going to help that highlight it or show it off, or help it blend into the rest of the quilting, depending on how good a job I did on the applique. So definitely, but usually applique is very irregular edged, right? It's a flower, it's a leaf, it's a wreath, or whatever you've got. So smaller things like pebbles I might put around in between those elements. And then as I fill up around it, then get some more area, then I can go into the swirls. So definitely, yeah, you're going to use fillers to do that. It's a perfect example of that. All right, this one, my ribbon candy and wishbones end up look like they're falling over. Any tips? Okay, so with the ribbon candy, and it's hard to explain, but I think this is in the expanded PDF, so if you should check that out. But like when I curve out, I need to make sure I go out enough to come back. What happens is as we go, we don't go out quite enough, and then our top gets rounder than our bottom, which, let's be honest, with my bottom is rounder than my top. But we want them to be round on the same, and so usually it means you're not going out far enough. What does that mean? It's usually because we feel more comfortable quilting one direction than the other, right? Maybe you feel comfortable working this way as opposed to that way. Just, it will come with practice, I promise. But that's usually why. Now, wishbone's a different thing. When we're quilting our wishbone, we want our lines to be parallel. So as I'm going and quilting my next one, I know it's hard with my hand motions, but I want it to be parallel to the one I just quilted, and that will help me progress. What happens is if one is not the same angle, then it starts going off kilter. So I'm trying to keep the straight parts of my wishbone parallel. So hopefully that helps. I know that's like, how can you explain machine quilting with hand gestures? Here you go. That's how we do it. What is a stitch and flip? It's similar to the drink and flip. No, I'm just kidding. Stitch and flip. So if you put the panels together, we're talking about the Westerly, if you put the panels together, there's this big blue chunk where they come together, and I didn't really like that. So I put a little bit of stitch and flip in the corners of the panel so that it made that white triangle in the center. Hold on real quick. Let's see if I can do this on the fly. Let's see how I can do this. We can show you real quick. Go back. All right, so if you look on the Westerly in the center where there's that white diamond, that white one, that just is stitch and flipped on the 4 panels. So that's what that is. And it's a technique where you put 2 fabrics together, you sew it, you stitch it, you cut it, and then you flip it open and you get that effect. It is in the pattern, so if you do decide to get the kit, it shows you how to do it. I was trying to think of something witty, like really witty for that, like the stitch and flip, like it's when you finish a quilt and you do a back flip to celebrate, but I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. So anyway, I hope that you've had fun with the series, the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, the fillers one. If you check out the playlist on my YouTube channel, I've also fit in the other videos and the live chats. I'll kind of put it together. But just know, again, if you're not there, no problem. I know it's busy, it's hot, it's summer. Real life gets in the way. It's there for whenever you're ready to work on it. And again, everybody, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss you. But I'm going to be in Alaska and then Utah, so I'm going to miss you, but not too much. I'm going to be where it's cooler and having a great time. But I'll be back on August 18th with the next live chat, so don't forget about me in the next 3 weeks, please. I look forward to talking about quilting and answering your questions. Until then, everybody, stay safe, stay real safe, and have a great rest of your July, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.